Thank you all for joining us for the presentation and equality and diversity, equality and equity. Really excited to have you join us, and really excited to be joined with some excellent guest speakers today. I'll start off by introducing myself. So I'm Scott Schill, Managing Director of Halo Staffing. Halo Staffing, we're specialists in providing temporary and permanent staffing solutions, both within health and social care, across a range of services within social care, and experts in providing staffing solutions. We have valuable knowledge in supporting people of all abilities in all areas of life. But the focus of today's webinar is really how we can level the field for people with disabilities. They might be one of your customers or one of your potential members of staff. Don't know if you're aware, there are over 14 million people in the UK who have a disability, and it's really important that you and your team know how to interact and to react to people both legally and morally. Disability employment rate in the UK is about 30% lower than people without a disability. It's about 52.5% or 82.5% for non-disabled people. And that isn't because disabled people can't work or aren't capable or don't want to work. It's because society and employers don't know how to adapt or see the potential of disabled people in the workplace. For instance, disabled people are more likely to be self-employed than non-disabled people. They want to work, but they find that they have to go out and find the work for themselves. You can tap into that. You can tap into the ingenuity and the creativity of these people if you know how. And we're going to talk you through today some of the ways that you're going to be able to do that. We're going to talk through disability confidence. So the disability confidence framework is creating a movement of change, encouraging employers to think differently about disability, to take action, and to be able to improve the way that you recruit, the way that you can retain your staff, and the way that you can develop disabled people. So today we're going to share with you some practical things, some things you can do straight away that are going to be able to make a positive impact, both for your business or your organization and all of the people that you come into contact with. So I'd like to thank today, welcome and thank Lee Turner for joining us today, our guest speaker. Lee's going to share with you some really valuable insight and things that you can do straight away, as I said, that are going to make a real difference. So Lee's worked within health and social care for over 30 years, including as a registered manager for outstanding services and as a change manager, providing consultancy and cutting across all aspects of health and social care. So cutting across older people, mental health, learning disability services. Lee's found himself in a position of being retired due to ill health and is registered as disabled, although doesn't see himself as being disabled. And I know that he's going to tell you, a bit about himself and a bit about the ways that you can also change the way that you view disability. So it's my pleasure really to welcome Lee and to let you start. Lee, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Scott. Again, just a little bit of a disclaimer that I am by no means an expert in equality or equity. I've got an interest and I've got experience that I think, or I'm hoping, will be useful to you over the course of the day. And if it's not useful to you, at the very least, it sparks a discussion and it sparks a debate that hopefully will snowball into change and help us change the future for people with disabilities. And I'll make a slight apology that the majority of the presentation is from social care and is about learning disabilities. It does touch on other aspects, but it still is very, very relevant to employers today. And you'll see why as we go through the presentation. So if I could have the first slide, that would be great. Or the next slide. I think we're jumping through a little bit there. We'll go back to the first one. Anyway, I'm not going to preach to you today about law and acts and legislation. Everybody, I'm assuming, who's attending here today has been through that a myriad of times. As I said, all I want to do is start a conversation about what equality is, how it impacts on people, and some things that we might be able to do to change the future. But have the next slide, please. So before we start getting into what equality is, well, I think it's important that we understand what inequality is and what inequality actually looks like. So what I'm going to do is just touch slightly on sort of the inequalities facing people with learning disabilities and primarily learning disabilities, just to give you an insight as to what's happening in the UK in 2023. Now, the next slide, please. So if we start at the beginning, as children with the learning disability, currently in the UK, there's over 350,000 children who have a learning disability in the UK. Of those, only 80,000 are currently assessed as having special educational needs. This amounts to only 29% of people who actually have special educational needs. Why is that important to understand? A recent survey that was undertaken by the Department of Education actually demonstrated that only 22% of teachers felt they could teach people with special educational needs. So already you're seeing that people with a disability are disadvantaged from a very early age and aren't able to access education system as everybody else or as fairly as everybody else. Not only that, but on the survey they did with parents, there's less than 15% of children with SEN found out their children were given information in a standard that they were able to understand in an accessible format to enable them to learn in school. So less than 15% of kids were given information which would enable them to be part of the education system. So again, you can see where that disadvantage comes from at a very, very early age. And it starts becoming ingrained. And you can see why people with disabilities start feeling that they are in fact disabled and they haven't got a place in society. Their very early experiences are saying, you are different, you can't be part of this process. And I'm not blaming the education system. It is underfunded, it is understaffed, and it does need a massive overhaul. And we need a debate around that within Parliament. I mean, if you go back to Tony Blair with his education, nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing's changed. In fact, it's getting worse because we're seeing more and more closures of what they class as special schools and people with disabilities being integrated into mainstream education. Well, mainstream education hasn't been given the opportunity to catch up and get ready for people with SEN. If we move on to people with disabilities in terms of friendships and communities, you'll see that people with disabilities have far fewer friends, so therefore aren't able to have the experiences that many of us take for granted. Only 1 in 3 of those people will spend more than an hour outside with friends of a weekend outside of the school, getting those experiences, those invaluable experiences that form the footing for their lives. Again, in a survey recently by Sense, it reported that I think it was around a third of people to a half of people with a learning disability reported feeling lonely and marginalised and excluded from society. This actually rises to 3/4 when you get to the ages of 18 to 34. And as we all know, loneliness is a massive contributor in terms of physical and mental health issues, which again leads to a poorer quality of life, poorer experiences, and again, poorer outcomes. And that you'll see that in terms of employment featured down the line because people aren't able to have those positive experiences, and also within the health system. If we move on and we talk about sex and sexuality for people with disabilities, which is still a massive taboo in this day and age, particularly around exploring sexuality in terms of LGBTQ+. What we'll find is that massive barriers actually exist. And these barriers we're told exist because of people's capacity to consent. People aren't able to consent to be able to have these relationships. But if you look at the bigger picture, when you actually talk to people with a disability, or people with a learning disability, what they actually found was that their ability to to decide for themselves, to make an informed choice, was based upon the information they were being given by staff and by relatives. And that information, again, was taboo. It was incorrect. It wasn't the full picture. So when you're asking people, are they able to consent? If they haven't got the information to be able to consent, then how can we even have that discussion? It's a really difficult one, but we need to move that forward because, again, people are being excluded from exploring who they are as an individual by society, by the very people who were put there to support and enable those. We're preventing people from moving forward in terms of who they are. Now, nobody asked me before I got into a relationship without consent, but because you've got a disability, it's automatically assumed that you're going to have difficulty around consenting to these things. And just to touch on a little bit about community, because I know I'm jumping there slightly, it is a big thing of mine because the regulator, CQC, and local authorities have this big push on at the moment about people being present in their community. People with learning disabilities have to be out there, have to be seen in their local communities, which is great. It's brilliant. Okay. But it's a step too short. It doesn't go far enough because, again, when you go back and you ask these people that you're making these decisions about, they're saying, actually, yes, we are present in our community, but you know what? I feel isolated because we're not part of that community. We don't feel accepted by our peers. We're being taken out for nice meals or to an art group or a drama group, but we're not included. We're seen as the person who has a disability. We're seen as the person who needs a carer. Society isn't quite ready for us. So even though we are there, we still feel excluded by society. And I think as Scott touched on before, sorry, I do ramble and I do jump from bit to bit. So stick a question in if you want us to slow down and go back. Scott touched on employment. Those figures are even more stark when you start talking about people with a learning disability, because currently only 5.1% of people with a learning disability are actually in employment. 5.1%. Why? Because the education system failed them, the societies failed them, and now employers are failing them. So it's a culmination of many different things that need to change before we'll see that. And you're talking about generations, you're not talking about in my lifetime, but we have to start somewhere and we have to start that conversation. Especially when you look at 5.1% compared to 82.7%, I think it is, of the general population who are currently in employment. Not to get political, that's if you believe the government's figures at this moment in time. Well, are we saying people with a learning disability can't contribute? And imagine how that would play out in your own mind if you were told you were unemployable, you can't work. And I can speak from personal experience because earlier this year I was told I was unfit for any form of work. And that had a massive impact upon me as a person and my mental health. Yet here I am. So we need to give people opportunities. We can move on and we can talk about health inequality. Now, I love the NHS. Just before I start having a go at them, they are the jewel in the crown. They are absolutely superb. But LEDA, LEDER, did a recent study into the ages of death for people with disabilities, learning disabilities. And you found that it's massively different compared to the general population. Now, we can take into account underlying health issues and all the rest of it, but again, modern day Britain, should we have these health inequalities? Should we not understand these underlying health conditions and being able to treat them? Now, it's 62 for a mild learning disability, 63 for moderate, 57 for people with a severe disability, and it drops massively down to 40 for people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. Why is that the case? It's the case because what they found was one of the biggest issues facing people today is accessible transport to and from appointments. People with disabilities being able to have access to transport, but also feeling comfortable and confident enough to use that transport to get to appointments. Many practitioners, consultants, GPs still aren't identifying that that person has a learning disability when they walk through the door to the appointment, aren't asking those questions. Why is that important? It's important because if you or I presented with an illness, would be treated for that illness, would get better and would go away. But many people with a learning disability have underlying health issues, which an illness can actually impact upon. Now, that underlying health issue might not be active, but as soon as you get an additional illness, it becomes active. And we fail to identify that and we fail to treat that. Now, isn't that disgraceful? That we're seeing people suffer because we're not identifying it. And I can give you a very real story. Not so long ago, we had a gentleman who went into hospital, needed surgery. Now, the anaesthetist and consultant did their questions and said, sorry, he's unable to give consent to have this surgery. That's fine. We can make a best interest decision. So to do that, we needed myself, we needed the manager, we need social workers, we need health practitioners. It took 3 weeks to get that meeting together, to be able to decide in that person's best interest. What happened in that 3 weeks? The person ended up at end of life and ultimately died 2 weeks later. Now, I'm not saying the surgery would have saved him, but it certainly would have improved his quality of life in his last few days. Just because they felt that person couldn't get consent and because we couldn't get diaries to match up. What a massive failing that is between health and social care. Massive failing. Also, what it showed was that people with nurses, doctors, health assistants had very, very little understanding of learning disabilities and disabilities in general. Unless you took that as part of your studies, you had very little information. And again, I'm going to give you some real life study there, where if a person with a learning disability goes to the hospital, we are required to provide hospital passports and communication passports, which tell you all of the health issues, the medication, how to communicate, how to get consent, how to discuss personal care, all the rest of it. Now, I can tell you from very real experience, at least 75% of the time, after we've dropped all that information off, nobody knows where it is. And we occasionally find that a person hasn't had a drink or has food left in front of them but hasn't been able to eat it. And again, that's disgraceful in this day and age. That's the inequality in the healthcare system when you have a learning disability. And that happens because the local authority and the health service fight with each other and say who's going to fund that person to support them. And nobody will make that decision. Now, that decision should be made from the point of access. We shouldn't have to go away and have that debate. Again, a massive inequality in health and social care. I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to go off on a slight tangent, Scott. But well, not a slight tangent. It's still relevant to equality. I got involved in an online debate the other day, and I know I shouldn't have. And I guess people would call a person a troll, and they were discussing the virtues of feminism, and we shouldn't need feminism in 2023. But I felt I needed to tell people these statistics because I went down a rabbit hole, and it kind of scared me, these statistics as well. I don't know if people know that women make up 51% of the population in the UK, but make up 70% of the poor. 70% of the poor are female. They make up 83% of single parents. They do 66% of the work in the country, but earn just 11% of the pay compared to men. Now, the government's own study on this, if we look at it globally, it's going to take us another 192 years for women to catch up in terms of pay equity. Now, isn't that disgraceful? So yes, we need feminism. Yes, we need equality. Yes, we need equity. I'm just going to leave those figures there with you. I'm by no means an expert on that, so I'm not even going to dwell on them. So we'll leave that there just for you to think about. If we just move on to the next slide, please. I said I'm not going to dwell on legislation, but I just want to make sure that people were aware we do have the Equality Act and we do have the Human Rights Act. Now, both of them base themselves on protected characteristics, so around disability, age, gender reassignment, marriage, civil partnerships, pregnancy, maternity, religion or belief, and sex and sexual orientation. And they're there to make the world a fairer place, in essence. So I'm just going to make the assumption that everybody is aware of these, but I just felt it was important to have at least one slide that said, this is why we have equality in the workplace or equality in society. So I hope everyone is okay with that. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just wanted to touch on moving the debate forward, why we should move the debate from equality to equity and justice. Okay, equality is very, very important, okay, because it relates to everybody being equal, everybody being treated the same way, regardless of any differences that people might have. Okay, we should be given the same resources, the same opportunities. Equity moves that further, and it talks about fairness. And more importantly, it talks about justice. and it recognizes that every single one of us has differences and different needs, and it aims to ensure that we receive support for those differences and support for those needs to then put us on a level pegging. Okay, so in essence, you're treating somebody unfairly to treat them fairly. And the next slide's going to say this far better than I just have there. So if we can have the next slide, please. So this is, as you can see, we're moving from what is currently happening through to equity and justice. And I think everything I've just said can go out the window, and you can just look at this picture and see why we need to have the discussion and why we need to move that debate forward. Okay. When we get to justice, we see that the systemic barriers have been removed from society and everybody truly is an equal. Okay. So I hope that picture actually screams out loud. It's a free picture. It's free from the internet, so it's free to use if anybody wants to use that back in their workplace. And we have the next slide, please. I think there's a lot of people on today, so I'm not going to ask the question, ask people to shout out loud. But if you can just take a few seconds to have a think about how would you describe disability? If somebody said to you, what is a disability? How would you describe that? I just want you to think the first things that jump in your head and just keep them there just for a few seconds. Okay. Everybody had a thought? Good, good, good. We'll move on to the next slide, please. So this was a quote that I came across many years ago, and I use to this day when people ask me, what do you mean by disability? What is it? It's basically the disadvantage of restriction of activity caused by society. Now, that's really important. It's really strong when you change your thinking from the person having a disability to society having a disability. Because society and the environmental factors associated with that actually say to that person, you're the problem. If we remove that and put it back on society, it is society's problem. We have to make the changes because we are excluding people by not making the changes, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's at the shopping centre or down at the local park. We are not moving fast enough to make sure that we treat people fairly and we give people justice. So we need people to change their thinking and think that it's society that has the disability. It's society that needs to change, not the person. Okay. And we're going to come on to think why that's important if memory serves me right. If we can have the next slide, please. Now, the reason why we need to change our thinking and why we need to start thinking about society being the issue is because primarily the system creates an issue, which is what we call the medical model. So from the day you're born, you're given a diagnosis and a prognosis, and that follows you through your life. And medical model always talks about how can we fix that person, because that's what medicine does. It fixes people, it helps people to get better. Most people with a learning disability aren't going to change, aren't going to get better, aren't going to be fixed by some miracle. Okay. But this is the model that we still discuss in society today. We talk about disability. We talk about throwing medication at the person. We think about the changes that a person has to make to their life and to their lifestyle, not about everybody else and everything else around them. What we need to do and what we are doing currently is starting to discuss the social model more and more and more. Now, this isn't a new idea. This has been around for many, many, many years. It predates me being born, but it's still not talked about enough. We still don't promote this enough. So as we've said, it focuses upon society having the disability. Okay, social and environmental factors ensure that that person remains disabled. Okay, because they can't be part of their natural environment. They can't have the experiences that everybody else takes for granted. They face the barriers, they face the medical issues, they face the attitudes from people in society. You know, whether that's somebody showing compassion and going, here, aren't they canny? Yeah, they might be, but they're still a person. They're not a baby anymore. Just because they've got a disability doesn't mean you can say words like that. We need an acceptance that everybody is equal within this society. We need to remove those barriers, and we need to have inclusivity within our society. If I could have the next slide, please. So how do we move forward? I've got it on a little bit, so let's talk about some practical things that we can do. So as you're doing today, by coming today, brilliant. Thank you for coming. This is increasing awareness. It's getting the message out there. Hopefully, it's starting to change people's mindsets, and hopefully, it's starting to have conversations when you log off today. So we have those discussions around diversity, because that's the only tool we have. It's the biggest tool we have, is to go out there and have those discussions and educate people and change the world. Okay, because I am going to change the world before I die. It might just be a minute percentage, but I will change the world somehow before I die. We advocate, we support, and we engage, and we influence policy. Okay, now you can do this at a local and a national level. And the very, very first place you're going to start is you're going to go away today and you're going to pick up your equality policy and you're going to think, what the hell does that mean? Does it mean anything in real terms? If I take the words from that page, can I implement them on a day-to-day basis? Can my team, can my colleagues, can whoever implement them? Do they actually fully understand what those words on the bit of paper means? Because I'll be honest, the majority of organizations having equality policy is a tick box exercise. Okay, they don't always truly think about what that means on day-to-day basis. Okay, for instance, you'll have an equality policy that says, I'm going to guarantee somebody with a disability to interview. Great, it's a step forward, but what are you going to do? How are you going to support that person? What are you going to change? Have you thought about job carving? Can you change that role to suit that person? You need to put some meat on the bones. You need to make it tangible. You need to have an accessible infrastructure. So again, you have an accessible workspace, the physical environment, the IT. You need to make sure that it's accessible. Do you have things in easy read version for people coming to interviews? Are your policies and procedures an easy read so people can view them, can understand them, can digest them? If they're not, could you go out and ask somebody with a disability to help you with that? Now, there's a quick win for your employment and employing somebody with a disability. Actually, go and ask the people who it impacts on, rather than these experts sitting in a room writing this policy. Go and ask somebody who experiences it every single day. Be real about it. Okay. We need to promote the representation of people with disabilities within the media. We need to visit local MPs. We need to go around to council meetings and support people who attend MP surgeries, because they're the only ones who are going to make that change. Okay, we can get out in the streets and we can shout, we can scream as much as we want. But as we're seeing in recent times, the government are taking absolutely no notice of that. Okay, we need to get in there and we need to be amongst it. We need to have those conversations. As much as we're paying me to sit down with a Tory, I believe somebody needs to sit down with a Tory and start explaining this and educating them and moving this debate forward. We need to have community support systems, because again, what you'll see, people with a learning disability are always out there, they're always supported, they always have a carer with them. Why can't we have a society that removes that need? Why can't we have natural support networks? Why can't we have groups that allow people to attend of their own volition? They're not seen as somebody who needs somebody to do things, because as a society, we actually care enough to support that person. We need to empower people to speak up for themselves. And again, another touchy point of mine is that people with a learning disability, when they speak up for themselves, they're called self-advocates. They're not, they're just talking on their own behalf. They need to be trained how to be self-advocates. They need to be taught, actually shut up and listen. Hear what they've got to say in their words. Don't put words in their mouth. Don't train them to say things in a certain way. Let them be themselves. So they're not self-advocates, they're just people speaking up, as I'm doing right now. I'm not self-advocating, I'm just being me. Okay? So again, we touched on before about your accessible information, but one of the most important things when you're looking at all of this, when you're going through your policies, procedures, when you're looking at how you can support people, is that you have a chart. You design a chart for the next 12 months and you go back and you review that and you constantly review that and you get somebody to check you to say, have you done it? How have you done it? What was the impact? Could we make more of an impact next year? But again, go and ask the people that it impacts on. Don't ask the wider population, ask people with disabilities, are we getting it right? Can you come and help us? And you'll find you're going to get help that you've never had before. You're going to have experts that you never knew existed because you always overlooked them. Yeah. Can we have the next slide, please? I think that slide speaks for itself. It doesn't really need me talking over the top of it. Okay, it is a journey, and it's a journey that we've all got to commit to and get on board with. Okay, we need to achieve that inclusive and equitable society for absolutely everybody. We need to do this. This isn't just something that your employer wants you to do. The world needs you to embrace this, and the world needs you to take this conversation forward. Okay, we can relate equality and equity and justice to many, many things that are happening around the world, and people need to have that debate. Okay, we'll not use the last slide because I think we've already touched on it. But please, please go away. As I said at the start, if nothing else, just start a conversation. You can say this whole slideshow was rubbish, and I talked out my backside for most of it. But go away and start a conversation. What can I do to make that change today? I'll stop now. Thank you very much for your time. If anybody has any comments, concerns, want to chat about this later, Scott has my details, and I'm more than happy for you to make contact. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Lee. That's great. And we'll be moving on to Christina in a minute about disability confidence, the disability confidence framework, and how that can make a difference for your organisation as well. But yeah, thank you very much, Lee. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to add into the Q&A, or if they want to raise their hand? Or we move on. No. Okay. All right. So as I said, we're going to move on to some information from Christina Williams. Christina's our support consultant. Christina started with us back in April 2021 and has been instrumental in our journey within Halo, both in becoming more disability confident ourselves and becoming disability confident leaders, and in our support within Access to Work. And again, we're going to tell you some more information about that, and the resources and the help that is there to support you to become more equal, and to be able to provide equity and justice within your workplace as well. So Christina, as I said, is our support consultant. Christina joined us. Christina has a support worker herself through Access to Work. Now, Access to Work is a government initiative and funded, and they can provide with all different aspects within to help disabled people into work. So they can provide equipment. So it might be that somebody needs a screen reader or some form of equipment that's going to make their work easier for them. It might be that they need a special desk or a special keypad or mouse. Again, they can help provide funding for that for you. They do the initial assessment. We can help with recommendations for that. And then they will then provide and source the equipment, and then fund that for the person who's joining you. They can also provide support through support workers. So lots of people who are able to do many aspects of the job of the role, but need some extra support. And Christina could tell you herself, she has a support worker. Christina's visually impaired. She's registered blind. And so there are things that only a support worker can help her do to make her equitable, as if she wasn't. So for instance, things that we take for granted. If you're on the telephone and you're having a conversation with somebody and you're taking notes, you can really easily do that if you're sighted. You can look at what you're doing when you're typing and you're recording that. You can also read other notes whilst you're having that conversation on the phone. Really difficult if you are visually impaired. So a support worker can then take notes for you. They can help relay information, and then Christina is able to do that role as equally as somebody who was sighted. However, there are lots of things that disabled people can bring to the role that you had already overlooked. Lots of skills, lots of ingenuity, like we mentioned. Really driven people who really want to make a difference and really want to contribute both to your organisation and to society as well. Again, Christina can tell you about the Disability Confidence Framework. So the Disability Confidence Framework has 3 levels. So the initial sign-up stage is committed. So you are aware of the Disability Confident Framework, and you're going to make one difference, one action that you're going to take for your organisation in the employment of disabled people. And there's a list there that you can go through. You can say, okay, this is going to be our commitment for our organisation. That you will then get the badge to become Disability Confident Committed. And you can work through the framework then, looking at your organisation, having those conversations that Lee mentioned about how you can make a difference within your organisation for disabled people, how you can increase your diversity, how you can be more accessible, how you're going to be able to better retain staff. We haven't really touched yet on the cost of recruiting people, on the cost of losing people and having to then keep on replacing those people. So if you're able to engage disabled people, you're able to attract and retain them, you're going to reduce those costs within your organisation. And that can have a significant impact for every person who you're able then to retain or to recruit and to entice into your particular workplace. The next stage in the journey for disability confidence is as a disability confident employer. So stage 2, level 2, again, we can give you help and advice on how to move through these levels, things you can look at, like the accessibility of your website, like the accessibility of your physical workplace, like your policies and procedures that Lee mentioned. And you're at this stage going to be, far more inclusive. You're going to potentially be employing people. You're going to be offering interviews. You're going to be making a difference for people with disabilities within your organisation. And as a spin-off from that, you're going to be more accessible as for disabled customers as well. So you're going to be more accessible for everybody who approaches your organisation, not just non-disabled people. And then at the third level, a disability confident leader, which Halo Staffing are, you're going to be really making a difference for disability in the workplace, removing those barriers, promoting the framework and promoting other ideas like we are today about the differences you can make.
My name is Christina Williams. I'm the support consultant at Halo Staffing, and I'll be talking a little bit about the Disability Confidence Scheme and access to work as well. So what is Disability Confident? Being a disability confident organisation is being the change you want to see, not just in your organisation or your sector, but in the wider community. It is playing the leading role in changing attitudes for the better. This scheme supports employers to recruit from the largest pool of talent, recruit and keep great people who are hardworking, loyal, and skilled. It will support you to save time as well as money on the cost of training and recruitment by reducing staff turnover. It'll help you to reduce levels of cost in sickness absences, as well as increase understanding of disability and long-term health conditions. The scheme has 3 levels, which you must complete before moving on to the next. So the first stage is Disability Committed Level 1. What you need to do is go onto the government website for Disability Confidence and agree to the commitments, as well as identifying one action which you're going to carry out to make a difference for people with disabilities. The commitments that you can choose from are inclusive and accessible recruitment, communicating vacancies, offering interviews to people with disabilities, and providing reasonable adjustments. as well as supporting existing employees. You will also need to identify one activity which include providing work experience, paid employment, apprenticeships, or traineeships. And you may even be doing this already, so why not sign up and show your commitment to equal opportunities for people with disabilities? Once you have signed up, you will get a Disability Confident Level 1 badge, which you can use on your website and other stationery for up to 3 years, as well as a certificate and information to support you in your Disability Confident journey. Next stage is Disability Confident Level 2. It's all about promoting your commitment to recruiting and providing opportunities and growth for people with disabilities or long-term health conditions. So this level looks at self-assessing your organization around 2 themes. The first theme is getting the right people for your business. And the second is keeping and developing your people. We, as Halo, have gone through this process not too long ago. And we would be happy to support your organization throughout the process as well. We can test your website and recruitment process for accessibility and suggest improvements as well. In fact, when we did this process for ourselves, we found that although our recruitment process was pretty much accessible, there were still improvements to be made, such as, ensuring that reasonable adjustments were made for people with hearing impairments at the interview stage. It's little things like that. So thinking about whether their interpreter, whether you might need to get an interpreter for them, or whether the interpreter might need a skeleton copy of the questions you're going to ask, just to make sure that they're prepared for the signs that they might need to use. We also found that making these adjustments weren't unduly difficult. So we'd love to support you with that. The next stage is Disability Confident Level 3, which we've recently acquired. So to reach this stage, you will be acting as a champion in your business and local community. You will also need to have your self-assessment validated by someone outside of your business, but it cannot be, it can't be an employee from the DWP or a job centre. Again, this is something that we can support you with, and would be more than happy to. For Level 3 employer, you will also need to provide a short written account of what you'll be doing to support your status as a disability confident leader. You'll also need to report on disability, mental health and well-being by referring to the voluntary reporting framework. Once you have completed this level of disability confident leader, you'll be sent a confirmation of your status, a certificate, and a Disability Confident Level 3 badge to use on your website and literature. which is valid for another 3 years as well. As mentioned, we can help with this and more. And as an employer, we understand how daunting it can be when first looking at employing someone with a disability. As you may be unsure of how to provide support, or even maybe the schemes out there to support employers looking to employ people with disabilities. Well, we can help with this as well through a government scheme known as Access to Work. Through this scheme, organisations are provided help and guidance to ensure that employees with a disability have the same opportunities at work as anyone else. We can support by offering guidance, suggesting reasonable adjustments, as well as train support workers to support your staff with any tasks they may find difficult in the workplace. For example, my own support worker supports me with visual tasks such as accessing information in tables, spreadsheets, PDF images, and so on. I also know and understand how important it is for some people with disabilities to feel comfortable with their support workers. This is why we take the time to understand the person needing support and ensure that they are matched with the right person, which will increase productivity. Employing a person with a disability or long-term health condition will not disable your business, but enable you to pave the way for other organisations to make that change and tap into the pool of talent that people with disabilities and long-term health conditions have.
You'll also be able to then help other people through the framework like we do. Okay, thank you. So you are able to contact us. We can help, as I said, with the Disability Confident Framework, with the Access to Work support. So please do get in touch. You can find us on the website. You can give us a call on our free phone number, and we'll be really pleased to see what difference we can make in your organisation for you. The initial conversations are completely free, and then really fair, easy pricing structures then if we're getting involved in the future.